In today's film, the good news is the afterlife has been scientifically proven to exist. And the bad news is the afterlife has been scientifically proven to exist. Problems remain. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, this was a fun episode to do all around. And first and foremost, I want to thank today's guest, writer-director Mali Elfman, for coming down to chat about her feature film debut, Next Exit. Now, one of the reasons this was so much fun to do is this was my first in-person screening and Q&A back since March of 2020. We've had a whole bunch of false starts to do new screenings in person with a crowd. And for a bunch of different reasons, all of them were sensible. It just hadn't happened until now. So it was really fun to do an in-person screening and Q&A that became our podcast. And kudos to Magnolia, the studio for Next Exit, for making this happen because it was a lot of fun. You could see Next Exit on VOD, wherever you find your VOD. You could rent it and watch it at home on Amazon or Apple, or there is actually a limited theatrical release. So check your local listings and see if you could mask up and go to a theater and see it near you. I know for sure it's in Los Angeles and New York this opening weekend. But look, Next Exit is a trippy film. It was shot during the pandemic, pre-vaccine, so they needed to be extra careful for this, which is a road trip movie. And Molly was very good about telling us what it was like to bring this long gestating project to life that she had been writing for years and to shoot it during the pandemic safely with her cast and crew on a road trip. So I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, Backstory Magazine turns 10. That's right. We survived a decade and we couldn't have done it without your help. And the other good news is that we just released a new issue. Yes, issue 47, our summer issue, is live. And there is so much great stuff in it. I hope you check out the table contents to see it all. But we have Emmy Awards contenders ranging from Stranger Things, Better Call Saul, Station 11, Barry, Hacks, and What We Do in the Shadows, to summer movies, to new scripts for you to read, to an interview with director John Carpenter on the 40th anniversary of The Thing. Man, there are so many great things in this issue, and I hope you check it out. If you have never read us before, you can, of course, test drive us over at backstory.net and read the free issue, or you could use the iPad app Backstory, where you could read the free issue there as well. And if you like what you see, and I hope you do, you could consider becoming a subscriber. And to sweeten the deal, I want to give you discount coupon code SAVE5. That will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. The code will work at backstory.net, and you enter it there in your checkout cart, but it'll give you access to both backstory.net and the iPad app as well. So, you know, it's 2 for 1. You get access to both easily. But look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube channel, which is all the Zoomcasts go of these interviews. So you could see us do the interviews. You don't have to just hear us, but it would really mean a lot to me to have you subscribe to my passion project. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of the Fine Arts Theater in Beverly Hills right after I introduced today's guest, Mali Elfman, to chat about her writing directing debut, Next Exit. So I just want to get a sense of who you are first for our podcast listeners out there and the audience here. For anybody that doesn't know, your father is a famous musician and composer, Danny Elfman. Yes. And what was it like kind of growing up in an entertainment family with a father like that? And you obviously, to my knowledge, did not go into music. You wound up writing and directing. So was that something you studied? Because to my knowledge, your breaking in story started with some acting as well. Yeah,
I very intentionally tried to avoid the film industry. You know, it's hard to say because my life was totally normal for me. I think probably the weirder part than growing up in Hollywood is growing up in a haunted house with shrunken heads all around. I mean, that was probably the weirder thing, and thinking it was totally normal. And I do think that you kind of see that in my work, because the big thing is I grew up around that type of stuff all the time, and that was just normal, and I wasn't very affected by it. Or maybe I was. I mean, Jury's still out, but no, very decidedly did not go into music. He's done a great job of that, so I don't really need to do that.
Yeah, your dad has it covered.
Yeah, he does. He also, I think the bigger problem with that is like, if I did want to do something in music, I would want to have the career that he had. You can't do that. That doesn't work. Whenever anybody tries to do that and tries to have somebody else's career, it would never work. And I think the way that he has reinvented himself so many times, I was so proud of him for his show at the Hollywood Bowl, where he just did what he felt in his heart. I don't think anybody was asking him to come out with a punk rock album, ska album. He just did because that was what was his truth. And, you know, I'm sure people showed up for The Simpsons, but they also showed up to, you know, see him do something completely new and different. And I really admire that. And I think that's why he is the artist that he is. I also think his way of like coming out on stage and the big charismatic dancing and voice and smile, I love it. I appreciate it. I think earlier in my career, I was always wondering how I would find that or whatever. And it's not me. In fact, my whole strength has been in vulnerability. And, you know, I always say I'm not a brave person, but I'm very curious. I'm scared all the time, and I'm fine with that. So I think it's embracing that has been really what has led me to where I am now.
Let's talk about your path. Did you study the arts in school? Did you study writing, directing, acting, anything? So
the big thing that I wanted to do in college was study writing. So I was English lit major at UCLA. Well, let's just jump ahead because let's give me a little bit too much credit. I started at SMC because getting straight into UCLA is really hard.
That's right. And Santa Monica City College is known as a very good feeder school. So you could get your GEs out of the way.
Exactly. And the other thing that I did is I had been a professional horseback rider. That was my career and what I thought was going to be my career path. And so I was going to SMC, trying to get into UCLA. And I was a horseback riding teacher at that point because by the time you're 18, you're washed up. And my student was Missy Stabile. And Missy Stabile, who used to be one of the headline producers for Universal. And she said to me, "You'd make a good producer." I was like, "Eh." And she said, "Come work for me." I was like, all right. So it was a great gig for me because I was teaching horseback riding in the morning, and then I would go work with her and go on set and go everywhere. So that was actually my first job, had nothing to do with anything to do with my family. And I actually worked on The Ring 2 was my first job ever.
Okay.
As a production assistant. And I had been a huge fan of The Ring. That was like, Samara was so cool to me. And I'll never forget standing on set the first day, or like, we had shot most of the film, all the special effects were at the end, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I see out of the corner of my eye Samara walking towards me, and I was like, and I saw the call sheet, I knew Rick Baker was there, I knew what was going on, but I still saw her, and I was like, is it really, do I die right now? And then she walked all the way up to me, and she goes, "I left my phone in the trailer," and I was like, oh, it's been ruined forever for me. But I did.
See, horses don't talk. You don't have to deal with that kind of stuff.
They do if you listen.
Oh, true.
But no, I got addicted to the chaos of production. I love working with everybody who has a goal that we are all on the same page, and it's this kind of tornado of chaos, and yet we're all kind of doing it at the same time. And I loved that feeling. And so that was my first kind of job of being in production. And then I worked as a PA on a couple of other projects. And I learned a little bit of the business from Missy, who then retired not long after that. And so then I went on and I made this it was great choice to try to act. So while I was at UCLA, I then got into UCLA and I was studying English literature because the big thing was if I wanted to do anything in filmmaking, be it acting, be it writing, be it directing, producing, I needed to read. I needed to understand story. That was the most important thing. So I had a goal while I was at UCLA. I read 10 works a week, which meant it could be plays, it could be books, it could be anything. I just read and read and read and read. That was my job. It was like the best time of my life.
No, that's fantastic advice too, because then you're decoding structure, you're decoding character, emotional writing, all that stuff. So
and what's been done before. How the hell can you be a writer if you don't know what's been written? And so I just spent so much time reading. And then my first job out of college, because me being type A, I guess you could call it, I was panicked coming out of college and I wanted a job. So I started working as a journalist. right away. And so I was a film journalist for 6 years.
Yeah, film journalism, dangerous industry there. Be careful, I got to tell you. But you wanted to leap out of it.
Yeah.
And so it would seem from what I had read online and what I had researched that it was short films that kind of led you on your path.
It was Do Not Disturb was my first film. So I was trying to act. That was hard. And not hard. I love the acting part. I really hated auditions. I really hated the game, trying to get an agent, all the new headshots, all of this stuff. I feel I have so much empathy for actors because it's such a fucking rat race.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear on this?
You fucking are.
Okay, great. I just realized. I'm like, oh God. And so it just wasn't for me. So I ended up coming up with an anthology film before everybody had done anthology films. And I came up with the rules of the world and the wraparound piece and everything. And I wrote a lead character. And I was going to play the lead character. I wrote myself into it. And then about a month before we were supposed to shoot, I was like, I don't want to act in this. And so I recast myself. Diva Zappa took over the role, and she did an amazing job. Diva Zappa, who's Karma and has been in multiple...
The hitchhiker in this film.
Exactly. And has been in almost every single film that I've directed. And so that was enough. Look, it was a feature film shot in 7 days for $30K. It's oddly still streaming through Gravitas. So
Say the title so everybody can find it.
Do Not Disturb.
Yes,
and I'm sorry if you watch it. It's not the best film, but I love it because it's lasted this long, and it was good enough. I did the film festivals with it, and when I was on the film festival circuit, I saw this film Absentia, and I met Mike Flanagan, and he saw my film, and he said, hey, I want to work together. And I said, yeah, I want to work with you. So that also launched me to another level. And then that's where you see, well, first of all, the first film that I saw Katie Parker in and became a fan. And I picked up one film that we were supposed to make, but then Trevor Macy, Flanagan's now producer, also found Flanagan around the same time. So he made Oculus. You'll notice I'm an extra in the beginning of Oculus because we were prepping to make another film, which was Before I Wake, which went right after that. And we shot Before I Wake, which was supposed to be my first big horror film. And 2 weeks before it came out, it had been bought by a company called Relativity, and they filed for bankruptcy. So there was billboards around town, 2,000 screen release, everything. And we couldn't get anybody on the phone. I found out later they just turned off all their emails and their phones. So literally we couldn't find anybody. They were having AMCs call us, and we were like, we don't know. And then we tried to find another distributor really fast and pivot. And then immediately they found us and called us and sued us. And so it was 3 years of a legal battle to eventually just drop it on Netflix because it got released internationally and then got pirated around the world. So that was my first big film.
That sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it was really great. And so when that happened, I was like, my life is fucked. And I have nothing. And I had 2 friends, Zeke Pinero and Michael May. And it was May. And they said, we want to make 31 short horror films for Halloween. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I needed something to distract me. And so I did. And then we did that and we were like, hey, this kind of actually worked. We actually got it distributed. It was going really well. So we decided to keep going. And the thing that I got to do there was I got really strong in taking something from a concept through production and through post and through distribution and understanding all the levels. I produced myself over 40 short films. We released over 300. And I got to work with Karen Gillan. And I did 2 short films with her as a producer. And then I moved on to making her feature film with her. And that's kind of where it all went from there. And I directed 3 shorts myself and worked with Rose McIver. Almost everybody that you saw in this film is because I made a short film with them.
Which is great. I mean, shorts are a great way to cut your teeth, to see how the system works, and to see it from beginning to end without having to go through the rigmarole of a longer production, a longer process, which the distributor might, go under and you have to sue them and all that other stuff. Yeah. So yeah. So that's a good thing. But so tell us about the concept for this, because this is your first theatrical debut feature film as a writer-director. And we see the evidence of a little boy playing cards with his dead dad.
Yeah.
That's how the film opens. Like, we're still in the non-spoiler section, but that's pretty clear what's going on. And here we have people who are fed up with life, wanting to skip out, hop over to the afterlife, and they want to do it often via suicide through the Life Beyond Institute, which is facilitating this because they have scientific evidence that the afterlife exists. And so 2 folks that are signed up to go there from New York to San Francisco hop on a mad, crazy road trip, and you basically have When Harry Met Sally with suicide at the end of the road. So it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful. Yeah. When did that idea come from? How long have you been gestating it to get it here?
I mean, the entire time that I've been talking about all those jobs I was doing, this was in the background.
It was. Okay.
Yeah, and the way that I actually started, which might be very obvious, I understand that I mixed every genre in this film, and I don't know how, I mean, thank you, Magnolia, for figuring out how to market that, but it's been quite a challenge. And for me, it was always a character study of these two characters, one who wanted out and one who wanted in, and that was very much me, kind of battling that out. And so I actually started by writing their backstories. There's so many scenes that I have of just finding their voice that I wrote that aren't in the movie. And I wrote poetry that Rose would have written. I wrote notes that Teddy wrote to his father. Like, I just became obsessed with who these characters were. And then I came up with the structure a little bit later, and then it was really about throwing them into it. So it changed a number of times, and I would pick it up and put it down and pick it up and put it down. And honestly, every single time something really bad would happen in my life. I would go through a severe loss. I wouldn't know how to handle it, and I would get caught up emotionally. I went back to these characters. They were kind of my way of dealing with my shit. And somebody asked me, like, how I feel about that. And the truth is, I, like these characters, have so much trouble talking about those feelings and me going through it, even after years of therapy, that I literally had to make a movie to talk about my feelings. Like, this is me trying to find a way of expressing that. So it was going on in the background this whole time, and it wasn't until I produced a short for Rose McIver, and we got drinks afterwards, and she said, what do you really want? Like, what is the thing? What is the thing if you could do anything? And I said, well, I have this little movie that I've been writing for a long time. And she goes, well, can I read it? And I said, I haven't really finished putting it together. And she's like, well, why not? And I said, well, I'm producing for you. I'm doing all these other things. And she was going to an iZombie horror convention the next week. And she said, come with me. I'm going to be busy all day. You write all day, and then we'll go out at night. And every single day you have to tell me what you wrote. And I accepted the challenge. And so I went with Rose. She locked me. Well, she locked me in a hotel room. Who gave me Starbucks. But it was finally somebody granting me the permission that was actually my job, that I could actually call myself a writer. Because I've written other things, obviously been a journalist, short films, all the rest of it, but I still have trouble calling myself a writer even to this day. And she said, you are, do it. And then I came up with the first real draft that I could build a budget off of, that I could go and say to producers, hey, will you work with me? And, there was more iterations past that. But that was the big changing moment.
So how many years would you say from coming up with the initial concept, getting sidetracked? Give us that number first. Not even writing the script. Just you're writing poetry. Idea. Putting these backstories together.
I'm trying to remember what year I got divorced. I think it was...
Okay.
That was the starting year. I think it's about 8 years.
8 years, okay. And then when you went to give your first script at this convention, the zombie convention, the iZombie convention,
yeah.
In that hotel room, did you get through a full draft, or did you get through Act 1?
No, I did the whole thing.
Whole thing. Okay, so that was your first draft. How many years ago was that?
That was about 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you've just been polishing it ever since.
Well, and then I went away again, because then I did another film, which is what keeps happening. And then it was actually when COVID hit, I was supposed to go into another production, and it stopped. And I kept trying to get it going, and it stopped. And I finally was forced to sit down.
Sure.
Which was very challenging for me. And I went back to the script again, another challenging time. And I finally finished it. I remember I called Derek Bachet, who's my producer, who's in the back there. And I was like, I know this sounds crazy, but out of all the films to make during a pandemic, I actually think this one might be the film. And I pitched my pitch, and he was crazy enough to be like, you know what, you're not insane. And then we got in a car to New Mexico, and we scouted, because we knew that we had to find at least some of the main locations that we could put. Tucumcari is actually where all the interiors of the motel were shot.
Okay.
And several of the exteriors. And so once we found that, we were like, okay, we can actually get a third of the film done here, and then we can go to Kansas. And then we started putting it together. So that was the first initial piece, was just us taking our boyfriends in the car and being like, oh, I felt so bad for them. Oh, so sorry, James. James and David, we appreciate you, because I think they thought we were going to go have fun in New Mexico, but it really turned into, we left before the sun came out, and we came back very late trying to find old gas stations that would let us film there. But that was just us.
Well, so I'm curious, kind of using that timeline and using how the film kept evolving, what were some of your influences for it? Because when I first saw the trailer, it reminded me of the 2017 film The Discovery with Robert Redford, which was a Sundance film. Charlie McDowell and Justin Later, they co-wrote it. Charlie directed it. And it was about somebody who scientifically had discovered the afterlife, but it was the whole film is taken from the point of view of the scientists. So did that at all influence you? Were there other films out there that influenced you?
Yeah.
This whole concept of talking to the dead, people have been fascinated with for thousands of years.
Yeah. I haven't seen that film. And the reason why I never saw it is because I remember reading like a little blurb going to Sundance that year, and somebody had said, "Oh, it sounds similar to like your idea." And I was like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to be compared to it. And then from what I read a few reviews. I was like, they're not doing what I'm trying to do.
No, it's very different.
Yeah, we're in a totally different ballpark, but I never wanted to get that in my head. I never wanted to. It sounded like such a different world, but something similar. And I was like, I don't want to fuck with that. I have to say this one wasn't so much me being inspired by a lot of films. I will say A Ghost Story, I feel like is prerequisite watching for this film. If I could like force people to watch, that's one of my favorite films. Another Earth is a big one.
I love Another Earth.
Yeah, I mean, that was also just an inspiration for me to get out and start writing and want to direct and be like, again, just one thing in our world changes and how does that affect you? And I love that element. The Orphanage, just in terms of the idea of what ghosts really are and what haunts you and why, and female protagonist dealing with some shit. Planes, Trains, Automobiles is a favorite one of mine.
The hell sequence in particular, when he falls asleep at the wheel and he sees the devil. Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to do.
Yes.
Did nobody get that?
Apparent all the way through it.
Yeah, that's
No, that's cool. I mean, I think you'd like the discovery now that your film's coming out. It's going to be on VOD on Apple and Amazon and anywhere people
It's
get
time.
VODs. Yes, your film is coming out, so now you can relax and watch it. It's totally different.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
they're not going for laughs at all in that movie. There's a lot of dread in that movie. But
Yeah.
I want to talk about your creative habit. When you sit down to write, how important is outlining to your process?
I don't.
Okay, not at all.
No.
No note cards, no Microsoft
I
Word
don't.
draft document, nothing. Okay, so you just start writing.
Yeah.
So when you were in the hotel room, did you start linearly or were you going nonlinear?
So because I knew these characters' voices, and I had the thing that I do, well, I should say this. I normally have Google Docs, love a Google Doc, and I'm just free writing as much as possible. And I always knew just the structure in my head that they were going to meet these people along the way. And that I had marked out, the roads. I had literally marked out on a map where they were going to drive. So it was very physical for me. I'm very about kind of seeing it in my mind, right? So I had done that. I knew who they were going to meet. I knew their personalities and I knew why they were there. And so then at that point, it is just about connecting the dots. And the thing that I always did was I knew where the scene started. Like I literally would drive them there. And then I knew these characters so well, it was about what would they say. And then I always knew like the roadblock that I would put in their way. You know, I don't want to give away anything. I'm trying to.
No, we're in the non-spoiler section.
We're in the non-spoiler section. But my whole thing is setting up expectations of a traditional scene and then maybe subverting it.
Did you know your beginning, middle, and end? Did you have a sense of how it was going to end when you sat down to write?
I did know the beginning, middle, and end, although the ending completely changed.
Of course, and I can't wait to hear about that. When you sit down, do you give yourself an hourly count that you want to hit of how many hours you're going to be writing, or a page count to hit each day?
I go to another place and I don't know where it is. I normally put on like classical music of some kind or film scores, nothing with words. I can't hear any words. Johan Johansson, Clint Mansell, like that type of vibe. And I start writing and literally I don't know how long I go away for, but I'm not of this world anymore. And then I kind of come back and it's very weird. Like I feel bad for my loved ones if they try to like come up and ask me if I want lunch. I'm like, who are you and what are you doing? I can't answer any questions. And then I kind of pop out of it. And then what I do is when I pop out of that, I read and I draft and I draft and I draft. But it is very much, normally I would say I can write about 4 or 5 hours a day like that.
Okay.
And then the rest is proofreading because it's always a mess. Because it just kind of like flies out. And that's kind of been the way that I've been doing it. I'm a journalist. That's a professional writer. You have to sit down. You have a deadline. There's a word count. There's an intention for why you're writing that. With a script, it's much different. And especially for this script. You know, I'm working on another script right now that kind of had more of a specific structure. And I have to think about how this adds into that. And there's kind of like a Rashomon sequence. And so it's much more strategic. It's a very different experience. This wasn't that. This was always an emotionally driven character study. And so if you don't follow the emotions and if you don't feel those emotions, you're not going to get there. It's not a plot-driven movie. And that was why I still can't believe it got made, because those are the hardest to kind of pitch and actually get out there.
Yeah. What would you tell us about your prep for directing this film? Because obviously you had the experience of the shorts, you've had that kind of trial by fire many times, and as a producer for all the shorts. But, directing, especially because you were doing this during COVID when things had slowed down, did it give you more time to rehearse with your cast?
We didn't rehearse anything.
You never rehearsed at all?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
No. For me, I had been dreaming of this film for a very long time. So I of course shot listed everything for the void or anything special effect for the opening. I got to storyboard, which, the stick figures help immensely, actually. It's not about being a good artist. It is simply about communicating to your team what you need done. But, I did 4 shorts, and the last short that I did was actually a documentary style short about my grandma who was passing away of Alzheimer's. And it was one of the last conversations that she had, and she had a memory of about 3.5 minutes, and it's intentionally a 3.5 minute short. And I went to go shoot it. I had my small crew of 3 people because I had been recording these conversations on my own audio, and I wanted to get it visually. And we walked in, and she kicked the crew out. And then we walked in. She let one of them in. She talked to him for a while, and she let the other one in. And then we started filming again. She kicked us out again. So all my plans of how this day was going to go went very quickly out the window. And I realized I have to work with her. What does she need right now? How can I give that to her? And so I just adjusted. And I feel like that was kind of next exit. And the beauty of that short was I feel like that's still one of my best works because I listened to the intentions of what that was and what she needed, and I followed that, and I let the camera follow that too. I wasn't so rigid in what my preconceived notions of what something was supposed to be. And especially for the on-the-road bit where, we had gone and scouted some of the locations, but there was a lot of locations we got to for the first time the day we were going to shoot them. So you shot list and you plan and you go and the sun's on the wrong damn side of the road and you change. And because I always knew the characters and I always knew why we were there, and that was always very clear, it allowed us to move with it. And I think if I had made this 10 years earlier when I first wanted to make this, I think I would have been rushed. I think I would have been frazzled when my plan wasn't going my way. I think I would have not been able to sit with these characters nearly as long. And I don't think I would have been able to be as clear. So I'm actually so grateful for this long road and for all those short films.
It could be a tricky road. If my research is correct, it seems that at more than one point, there were other directors that liked your script enough to get involved and maybe we're going to make it. Is that correct? Because it's something that a lot of first-time screenwriters are struggling with, in which they want to be produced because it'll bring them closer to that goal of possibly one day directing. So it's very hard sometimes to say no.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what could you tell us about that stage of the development process, if my information is correct?
Well, I didn't think I was going to direct this at first. I did not have that confidence in the slightest. And it wasn't, originally I was writing this, that's why you see Eric Balfour's name. Eric Balfour was one of the first people who was like, you need to be a writer and you need to be directing and you need to be doing all of this. And we were trying to work on this together, and it became very apparent that we wanted to make 2 different films. He wanted to make something like fun and action-driven, and it probably moves so much better than this. And I wanted to make this poetic conversation about the afterlife. So we agreed, we don't want to make the same film, let's part ways. But he was one of the ones that I appreciated because he was like, keep going. And then I was still not directing, and I had taken this to Mike Flanagan a while, this is right after Absentia. And he got to know me, and he's like, this is your film. What are you doing? Like, stop, no. And so there was a couple of different moments, and it took me until Rose, like many years later, and I was like, this is my film. This is what I've been wanting. And it took a while for me to accept that that was what I wanted and to be able to say that. It was incredibly intimidating for a long time, and I still think is. And I still am surprised that I did it. Like, that's still pretty weird to me. Like, whenever I come here and my name is on there, I'm like, I definitely have some imposter syndrome.
A lot of young writer-directors do, but I mean, your name's there. You did it, so congrats on that.
It's weird.
But it's not easy to get it done. So it's one thing to have a script. It's one thing to have a cast. You were going back to some of the people that you'd worked with on the short films. What was the biggest hurdle you had to cross as a first-time writer-director to get your green light?
Well, honestly, this wasn't the script that I thought I would make first, because there's other projects that I have that are much more like well-packaged. It's much easier to see how they could be made, marketed. This again was one that if I didn't execute the tone, it wouldn't work. If the performances weren't great, it doesn't work. This can fall on its face so easily. And so that's why I met a unicorn. And her name is Lindsay, and she's Elm Street Productions, Lindsay and Joel. And honestly, if it weren't for finding financiers, it's funny because when I first met them, I pitched them everything but this. And then I just sent it over and they read it. And they said, what about that one? And I was like, well, I'm not finished writing it. And they're like, we love it. And I was like, you do? And they're like, we want that one. And I was like, well, and I explained to them, because this is their first time investing in a movie. I'm like, well, this is why you won't make your money. This is why this could be a challenge. And they were like, no, we trust you. And they trusted me the whole way through. And that doesn't happen enough. The reason why you get films that are outside of the box is because an investor says, do your thing. If this would have been manipulated or had people trying to control it, it would have been a very different film very, very quickly. And and it could have been in many different iterations. I think people tried to make it that, and it is financially somebody trusting you. That's a really big deal.
I'm from Kansas City. I saw you worked with the Kansas City Film Commission.
Yes.
How did you arrive on Kansas City as a possible place to shoot? And tell us where you arrived as your shooting locations.
So Kansas City. So I actually, when I was making The Party's Just Beginning, Karen Gillan had just worked with David Dastmalchian on All Creatures Here Below. David was looking for a producer for his film Hide Your Eyes. So David, I was like, yeah, I read the script. Love David. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I joined that. And then I had worked with so many female horror directors. I said, I want to bring one of my directors. And he said, actually, I know somebody. And I'm like, you don't know the ones that I know. And then I saw Laura Moss's short Friday. And I was like, holy shit. It's a really fucking good short. So then I met Laura Moss. And so we were actually prepping that film. It was going to be made by Alcon. We were in Kansas City scouting, picking out our office. And then Blade Runner came out and tanked at the box office, and Alcon pulled our financing. And off that one went. But Laura and I were like in the back of, scout vans hanging out. And we were getting along. And we're like, well, what else you got? And that's the film that I actually just made, Birth, Rebirth, that I just got back from 6 weeks ago. So all these roads start leading together. But
in Kansas City, you made that film?
No, we didn't make it in Kansas City. Okay. We made it in Jersey.
Little east, yeah.
A little east. And Jersey's a tough town. Anyways.
Kansas City has the better barbecue, though.
They do.
Jack Stack or Casey Joe's, formerly Oklahoma Joe's.
Yeah, I think I did go. David Dastmalchian took us on. God, I got so sick. So much barbecue, and I did not process that well.
It's so good.
It's so good, but
the
it is
Z-Man
heavy.
sandwich from Casey Joe's is what Paul Rudd has flown to him on set sometimes. He literally pays somebody to, not all the time, but he has paid them to go there, get a sandwich, get on a plane, and come straight to set with the sandwich, which he eats. Which
that sounds like a great job.
Pretty crazy. It would be a good job.
Yeah.
Well, so what?
But anyways, so I had gone to Kansas City. I loved it. I had made friends with Steph, who runs the Kansas City film office. And so I called her up and I was like, hey, I'm making a movie. I need some snowy streets. And she's like, boy, do we have the streets for you. And a couple of old motels. And so they were wonderful to work with. And so we worked with her. We worked with the Film Commission office out there. And then we started there. So originally the plan was to go to New York and drive across the country. COVID hit. That was hard. I had wanted to fly actors out to meet us for all of their scenes. Couldn't do that.
Right.
This is all pre-vaccine. This is we didn't have the protocol very much yet. We're still figuring it out.
We'll get there in a second, because it was, what, 21?
Yeah, January.
January 21? Okay.
Yeah, right after the insurrection, as we were just talking about.
Fun times.
Yeah, it was really great. Checking out for a few months was actually the best thing, I think.
It's a good time to check out of reality. So you went to Oklahoma next? Was that your next place?
We drove through Oklahoma. We didn't stop anywhere there, but you did. Some of the beautiful skies are in Oklahoma, because Oklahoma does have beautiful skies. Went through Texas a little bit, and then we showed up in Tucumcari, and that's where we stayed for 8 or 9 days. And we got all the motel interiors. We got the cafes. Well, one of the cafes. We got a lot of the driving. We got all of Karma. And then we were driving to Albuquerque, where we were going to get the other piece of it. And this is like when people ask me how many days, I'm like, well, this is how a day started. We shot a scene in Tucumcari. We loaded up all the vans. On our way to Albuquerque, we stopped in Moriarty at a gas station, shot for an hour and a half, packed up the vans again, and then went to Albuquerque, and then shot them walking into a building. And that's a day. So,
wow.
It's a weird schedule. We decided on 22-4B was the number of days.
22-4B.
Yeah.
I like it. And what was the budget? if it was 22
Am I allowed to say?
and a half days?
It's underneath 1 million.
Underneath, okay, that's great.
Much.
I mean, it seems like the perfect time because also shooting during, it's at that point kind of still lockdowns voluntarily, but there was no vaccine yet, so people were kind of still keeping it very safe, and there weren't a lot of protocols yet.
Yeah.
Did you kind of have pod kind of concept going?
That's
and
exactly
how did you keep that going on the road? I'm guessing you just had a crew that could travel with you. How many people were in it?
17. It was 20 total, but that was with our actors. So,
including the actors?
Including
okay.
the actors. Although the clerk that checks them into the first motel, that's our editor.
Okay.
Let's see. All of art department makes an appearance at some point. Like, it was just filling the world with our crew.
But it's interesting because for all those years that you had been waiting to make the movie, only because of the protocols that were going on with COVID shooting, most of your scenes are 2 to 3 people.
Yeah.
So it actually worked out that if you guys were in a bubble, because of your low cast count, it really made sense.
That was part of my pitch.
Okay.
I was like, look, we don't need a lot of people.
Yeah.
The road around us and the cars will fill in our world.
Even at the end of the movie, when I was just rewatching it, it dawned on me, like, they're driving up and there's a piece of dialogue when they're getting to the, scientific facility and they're like, oh, I guess it's too early in the morning for the protesters. I'm like, that's a good COVID line. Like, why there's no protesters outside.
Yeah, I can't put 30 people in a pack right now.
Right,
Are you kidding
right.
me?
That makes sense.
And this is. Look,
Well, so did you make it? Was your crew safe? Did the bubble work?
The bubble did work, and we also got very lucky. It was such a false start for our actors because our investor's family knew a private jet, which is ridiculous. So we ended up, because we also couldn't. We were all
Right.
scared to fly on planes at that point.
Yeah.
We hadn't gotten our hair cut. It was that stage. And so we ended up, we were afraid to get on a public flight. So we ended up flying on 2 private jets out to Kansas City, getting the cars and then driving all the way back to LA. But it was just so funny to take these private jets and then land in Kansas City and then stay at like one of the not fanciest motels you've ever been at in your life. I remember Rahul couldn't fit into the bathroom and the shower went up to his shoulder. He's a pretty tall guy. It was really funny. So, we...
Only because you're bringing it up and it's just random. And by the way, I've lived most of my life here in Los Angeles, but the airport that you flew into, which was in the middle of the city, right? That is only for private jets. The actual regular ass airport. Yeah. Didn't you notice that there was nobody there and it was tiny?
It was very...
it's like the rest of the airport is 30 minutes away from that.
You want to know why I didn't notice? Because we flew into such thick fog.
Oh, okay.
We literally couldn't see the runway. And we had been going down for so long. And I'm like, we have to find ground at some point. Please find ground. And then I did not even see it. And then we hit. And I was like,
Yikes.
It was one of the most terrifying experiences. So you could not see anything. It was just, we flew into the densest fog. And I was very grateful we were all okay.
All right. Well, you're okay because I'm okay because we're going to get into the spoilers right now.
Spoilers.
So podcast listeners, if you have not yet seen Next Exit, go watch it on VOD through Apple or Amazon. It is also playing in a small theatrical run in, is it LA, New York?
Starting November 4th. It's LA, New York, and 6 other cities.
Look in your local listings. Look for Next
exactly.
Exit.
Go to our website.
We are going to get into the spoilers now. So if you have not yet seen the movie and don't want spoilers, press pause, go see Next Exit, and come back. I guess our first easy spoiler question, you could have named this anything. Why Next Exit?
It's a little bit of a pun, but also it's a road trip. I mean, just me literally driving on the road and seeing the next exit and always trying to hang on for the next one. Then there's also the metaphor of choosing to stick around a little bit longer. Let me just wait for one more exit, one more. Maybe I can take it, and that goes to Teddy's line at the end. Just one more minute. Maybe one more exit. Maybe I can keep going. This is also me when I have to go to the bathroom really bad on road trips.
There you go.
Just one more exit.
Well, not to add a pun on top of a pun, but I always ask this about left turns. For a road trip movie, it has different connotation, but really left turns in your script. Mm-hmm. What are things, now that we're in the spoilers, that you had original ideas of on paper and your different drafts and in the different notes that you took, never made it into the movie? It's not something that you shot, but for a while in your mind, for a month, a year, a week, a day, the movie was going to have this in it. What were some of those things?
Oh my God, there's a lot of those.
It's not even the ending. We'll get to that.
Yeah, there's some cut scenes between the two of them. Well, first of all, it opened originally with a full 10-page scene with Rose and 10-page scene with Teddy. Like, we actually got their backstories. Like, we actually understood so much more about them. And then everybody was like, the first note that I got was, get them in the goddamn car.
Yeah.
And I was like, got it. And then, so I just tried to give them a little abbreviated, give you a moment with each of them. And then we just got on with it. So that was like, and again, that was part of my whole backstory. I'm trying to think. There was definitely a scene with Dr. Stevenson in person that I really loved, that I thought would make it, that we had written, that Karen had memorized, that we were ready to go with. And then, honestly, the problem with it was whenever we got to the end, because it had to be at the end, just everybody just wanted to know what's going to happen with Rose and Teddy. It had taken over emotionally. So it's not there. I still like that scene. And we actually do have another scene with Karen that if I were to ever be able to make a sequel, it would be a very fun scene to have.
I want to hear about that a little later. So as we're coming towards talking about the ending, definitely tell us. But you mentioned it earlier. Tone is definitely something that is very much a tightrope act here.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about the studio marketing, and Magnolia's marketing essentially is saying that it's a horror dramedy in a sense, right? Because there's the supernatural element. There's actually a lot of comedy in this movie. It really isn't exactly a horror film, but these people are haunted without a doubt. So it is kind of somewhere on that spectrum. Talk about managing the tone between the drama of their trauma, the comedy that you're infusing to keep it, digestible and moving, and the horror of these faceless creatures that are manifestations of their past.
Yeah, and the horror, I'm always, because I really want to make horror films and because I have made horror films, I'm very sensitive to this being something that uses horror tropes and has some horror, has a ghost story, but I really don't like to call it horror. It is a challenge. I remember when we made the film, we sent out a questionnaire with it, and it was like, check which box applies for the genre, and like every single time they would be like all clicked, and we were like, And I was like, leaning into it. Just keep going. Again, it's about these actors. It's about these characters, and that's always what it was. And both of them are haunted in two different ways. Both of them are, I believe, depressed. I wanted to show different sides of depression. Depression is not just, I'm sad. Sometimes it's up. Sometimes it's angry. Sometimes it's funny as fuck. Sometimes it's drunk. It's all over the place. And for me, it was always about these two characters and their journey. And so emotions don't tend to be one genre for me.
Sure.
And so when it's emotionally driven, it allows you to kind of wander in and out. Now, that being said, I believe in ghosts. I've always wanted to make a ghost story. I have many ghost experiences. I have just accepted it as part of my life.
You have ghost experiences.
Yes, many.
I like it.
But so I just, for me, it was, I just want everybody to, let's just get into the ghosts of it all. They actually exist. What does that do to humanity? Because I'm sick of arguing it. I'm sick of getting into all of that, and I didn't want to have that be the argument. Instead, I wanted to say it exists. How does that make you feel? Therapy session with a ghost.
On that though, it's interesting to talk about the rules of that. The opening of the film, he's playing cards with his dad.
Yeah,
it's a positive experience. Now, it could go Pet Cemetery and go bad real fast, because it's his dead dad. Well, who knows? Who knows?
No, not Nico and Rio.
Okay,
it's
Nico
sweet.
and Rio, they're fine. But I mean, it's unclear what some of the other presences are, because it seems like they're a manifestation of trauma. So how far did you get into deciding what those rules were for the ghosts?
It's and I try not to answer too much of them, because it was a world that we spent a lot of time on building, but I have found that people have different interpretations, and I'm like, yeah, you should go with that. But for me, the whole thing is how do you deal with your trauma? So a lot of times, a young child who loses their loved one, they just want to play with he just wants to see his dad again. That's all he cares about. So when his dad shows up, it's not very traumatic or scary, because his dad is showing up to play cards with him. It might be scary at first, but maybe if you look at it from another perspective, actually that's exactly what I want. And I feel like children are actually much easier to go with the flow on that, because they haven't been told what to be afraid of yet. So that was why, and I always like to start my projects with kind of a little thesis statement of what the entire film is about. And so I really tried to start it with, first of all, slow your ass down. We're going to take a really long time to get through this damn door. So just calm down, because this is going to be you ain't getting through it fast. Then the next thing is, starting with a little bit of a horror trope and a little bit of a traditional horror build, and then breaking it immediately, and then showing a new perspective, right? So first of all, we are the perspective of the ghost coming down the hallway. Then we are with the perspective of the boy. And then we're with the perspective of the world watching this boy. And so how our perceptions shift, but also the idea of maybe if we look at what scares us from another perception, maybe it's not that scary. What's then scary is how we perceive it as a society, because we can't just accept that. And so that's when you then pull back, you get the news, and then you pull back to Dr. Stevenson, you keep going back, because it's all about how we perceive what we're scared of. That's the entire movie.
Right, and you straddle from two different directions in which the afterlife is scientifically proven in the film, and they're both going to hopefully get to the afterlife, so they think, by going to the clinic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, one of them, obviously Rose, has ghosts haunting her.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Teddy does not. There is no physical manifestation from him.
Well, because she's running from something and he's running towards something.
Was there ever a version where Teddy was seeing ghosts? Okay, never. Okay, gotcha. That's good to know.
Well, I don't think we all have ghosts. I think that there's a reason why some of us have ghosts, and I think that's why we meet John in a bar, and he has his ghosts, and he's terrified of it because he would have to change something about himself in order to deal with that, and I don't think he knows how to do that.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because, it's a cop, John, suffering from PTSD about a family that he accidentally killed by kind of pulling a joke on them that were, refugees, that were migrants trying to cross the border, and he's haunted by it. He's drunk by it. Like, the one medicine that they keep using is alcohol, in which they're over self-medicating. And it's interesting that he has that, and I was just curious if there was ever an iteration where if Teddy had something that extreme, because it's interesting that you see it for John's perspective, because back and forth, Rose, you can't decide how bad or how traumatic her ghost is, or if it's more of a, I hate to use the word guardian ghost or something like that, kind of guiding her, because she does mention to being guided.
But you notice every single time she makes a choice, the ghost shows up.
Right.
Yeah.
Like at a crossroads of sort.
There you go.
That's influencing her, which is interesting. Ooh, hey kids, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you that Backstory just turned 10. That's right, we've made it a decade. We're here, we've survived, and we couldn't have done it without your help. And, we want to keep doing it. So your support means everything to us. And now is a perfect time to subscribe because we just released our big summer issue. That's right, we have Emmy contenders ranging from Stranger Things, Barry, Better Call Saul, What We Do in the Shadows, Station 11, and Hacks. We also have summer movies. We have an interview with actor Glenn Powell, who plays Hangman in Top Gun Maverick. We have John Carpenter, the director of The Thing, on its 40th anniversary. Looking back, there are so many great articles to read in Backstories. Huge summer issue. There's also scripts to read. I know you'll dig it. If you've never read us before, you could, of course, test drive us by reading the free issue, which you could find at backstory.net on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And look, after you check us out and test drive us, I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber. And just to sweeten the deal, I want to offer you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. All you got to do is enter that code at backstory.net, and it'll get you access to both the iPad login and over at backstory.net on a desktop or laptop as well. Look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of all these Zoom casts. That's right. You could watch us do these interviews because they were Zooms that I've put on YouTube on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now let's jump right back into our interview with writer-director Mali Elfman about her writing and directing feature debut, Next Exit. But then for backstory and exposition, if you're not careful with exposition, it gets boring.
Yeah.
But here you have it come out in drunken statements late at night, as Teddy's passing out. You learn about his history. So what kind of tricks of the trade did you use to mask your exposition?
That's a really hard one. And I was one that I was always trying to balance. One of my favorite ones is actually earlier in the film when Rose kind of has this, he's like, why are you doing it? Tell me why you're doing it. And that could so easily go into like a melodramatic. And she's like, I tried, I did pills, I did this. And I'm like, it was always such a I wanted to get it out. And I'm like, this is so melodramatic. So, I wanted to always take that moment, which was a bit melodramatic intentionally, and then basically kill somebody and then completely destroy that moment and turn it into something else. For me, that's kind of a way of having a joke, in these moments and finding ways of getting out their truth and having that, but also subverting it immediately and being like, yes, we're going to go there, but I don't want to dwell there either, guys. We can get you the information we can get out. So it was always about trying to find clever ways of doing that.
Well, right. And you had to explain how they had, bad suicide attempts that didn't work. And that's why the clinic's going to be their better passage to the next place. So you had to get that out there earlier. But it seemed to me that one of the things that you were doing with the middle of the movie was the concept of secrets, in which they both had these secrets. Obviously, Teddy learns the information that the clinic might be shut down by a court injunction, and he wants to tell her but doesn't. Rose finds out where his father is and plans a surprise visit so he can confront his father. At what point did that concept of these two secrets kind of dueling with each other start to guide your momentum?
Well, they're both trying. Then they start the film, they're both thinking, me. And a lot of times when you're depressed, it's me. I'm having trouble. All these issues, me, 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 me. And then you see them starting to realize there's another person, you. And you see them trying to help the other person in their own ways, but they're doing it wrong. And both of them are doing it by trying to hide it from somebody else because they still can't just say their shit to one another, which eventually they have to get to. But for me, it was important that that was kind of like an opening up and that they both do it and they both struggle with it. And so that's what both of those secrets are. Now, both of those actually do somewhat help the other person. And especially, I think, with Rose, I think that's a really big deal, is it's the first time that she does a selfless act and realizing that she's kind of the only one that can give Teddy the thing that he truly needs. I actually snuck in the back and I got to watch that scene because it's one of my favorite ones when she becomes his dad.
Well, I was going to ask about that because, he doesn't get to confront his dad the way that he wants. And he goes to the bathroom because he's a little panicked. And by the time he comes out, his dad's gone from the bar. And he's very upset about it. And then Rose just, I don't know what she's doing. I want you to tell us what she's doing because she's using like something that maybe she learned in a Psych 101 class in college, because we know that she's not a psychologist of any sort.
No.
But she's playing the role of, his father.
Yeah.
And getting into a verbal argument with him so that he has a chance to get it out and confront this iteration, which is made up, obviously, and he knows it's made up, but he feels good getting it out. Where did that approach come from? And was there ever a scene where he did really confront his father? No. Okay.
No, that's not fun. We've seen that.
Sure.
That's the thing is, like, I wanted to take these things and I wanted to do them, but I wanted to find different ways of doing them. That was the whole thing. So no, there was never a scene where he confronted his father. It was always a gift that Rose could give to him. That she could see what he needed. And I don't know a lot of people or characters that would be willing to push somebody to that limit and push them over. It's a dangerous thing to do. It's not a smart decision, but that's Rose. And that's why these two people kind of found each other. And so for me, that was always a very important thing. And it was always one that when people read it, everybody always asked me, what is this scene? Because people used to think she's possessed by a ghost. And I'm like,
oh, that's interesting.
No, she's not. And I remember Katie being terrified of shooting that scene. And she was just being like, people are going to get this? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, are you sure you're going to get that? I'm like, yeah. And then I always saw it on the day I was going to have to like help get her like there and really go for it. And then she comes out the gate, I say action, and she fucking slammed Rahul way too hard. She went way too big. And I was like, okay, bring it back. We went to an 11. We need to be at an 8 or a 9. It was both of them understood it. Both of them got it. And they were just ready to, go for it.
Rose's next secret is basically after they have sex, they become the romantic couple that we expect from the road trip, going all the way back to It Happened One Night, right?
Yeah.
One of the first road trip movies. I hate you. Well, you're not so bad. We've been trapped in a car for a while.
There's a lot of angst. But I also love adding that kiss in one of the moments that hopefully you least expect that kiss to happen.
Right.
I think I always get a, huh? And I'm like, yeah.
At the end of the scene that we were just talking about, where she was his father. So
I was like, that's what I was going for.
But the next secret comes out in bed, when they're talking, and Rose admits that she had an affair one night with her sister's husband when her sister was out of town, and that really we understand her ghost kind of better at that point, in which her ghost is like being haunted by disappointment. Yeah. She wasn't the overachiever.
Well, shame. I think.
Shame, right.
I think shame is the big one. And also, some people have asked me, did I ever want that to be bigger? Like it was like she murdered a family or did something like that. And I was like, no, because those aren't the ghosts that haunt us most of the time. The ghosts that haunt us are the things that if we could just actually tell somebody the truth and sit down and have a conversation, we'd probably be fine. But the terrifying truth of saying what she did to her sister is something that she can't figure out how to get out. And that's where that comes, because that small little thing becomes a giant monster at that point.
Well, right. So she programs a trip to stop in Arizona and see good old Nick and her sister. And you're then now, the audience is ahead of the characters, at least for her sister and Nick's case. But obviously, Teddy's completely on board, and he has no idea what he's walking into and what's going to happen and what she's going to admit.
Poor Teddy.
But again, as you're saying, for major decisions, the ghost shows up. She does see that reflection of her mother somewhere out of the corner, and she decides rather than, have a big confrontation, that she announces that her and Teddy are going to get married in Vegas. That's why they were there. And then there's another moment outside where she still could tell. But it's interesting because her sister Heather suddenly is saying, like, I've got my family. I don't need any help here.
Yeah.
And you kind of leave it up in the air as to whether her sister knows that she cheated with her husband or not. And it's kind of like a first chink in the armor, per se. So tell us some of the iterations of that. And did, does her sister know in your mind? Or did you just want to keep it right down the middle and just leave it up to the characters?
I think, to talk about the scene earlier, I think that's one of the first moments that we actually get to see when Rose's bold-faced lying is the moment that we actually get to see the truth of what she probably really wants in her life. I think that's the deep down wish that she could have something like that. And so I always loved that the biggest lie was the biggest truth. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to play with there. And Teddy hearing that and seeing that and not being afraid of it, but being willing to hold that for her in that moment. So that was always really important for me in that scene. And I think she did go in there absolutely with the intention of, I have to tell my sister. I have to know what's going to happen. Before I go to the other side, I'm going to do this. I'm going to deal with this. So I think that was the intention. And I think part of that ghost appearing is, this isn't actually the best. Blowing up my sister's life isn't necessarily the best thing. But then there's also this annoying husband, Nick, played by Nico, who is the sweetest man ever. And so she does try to say it. The conversation that I had with Rose McIver is she absolutely knows. She knew the next day. She's been trying to get a hold of her sister because her and Nick had the conversation about it, that they worked through their marriage. They probably had a couple of shit years, and then they probably went to a lot of therapy.
So she does know in your mind. Okay.
I think she absolutely minds. And then the big thing is her sister abandoned her. Her mother died. She's fucking pissed off. Get your ass back here, girl. Just be a part of this goddamn family and get over your shit. And she says that, I think, with the best intentions of, like, you got to sort your shit in order to...
Right, she says, don't worry about my problems, worry about your own.
Yeah, and she says you got to do that. And I think Rose misinterprets that because she thinks that means she doesn't want her there. And so I think that that's just another one where Rose is letting her own fears and shame get in the way of actually being able to, see the truth in that moment.
Editing is the last stage of storytelling. Usually after a shoot is concluded, you're able to come back, get a rough cut, finesse it. You did something really strange and interesting in which you brought your editor on the road, which is
bringing
rare.
Brett with me everywhere.
So tell us about that.
Brett's here tonight. No, he's not here tonight.
Okay. So tell us about that, and how did that influence your shoot as it was happening? Did being able to see an edit that fast give you an idea for any rewrites or anything that needed to be reshot, since you had the luxury of being able to get some of the scenes that you were shooting back faster, because most directors would see them in dailies, right? And we could rewatch them on set, but getting that extra set of eyes in there as an editor.
Oh, it's totally different. Dailies, I actually don't really like dailies that much. It lets you see that you got the shot. That's great. But honestly, I normally know that on the day. I can kind of see that. So for me, knowing that it's cutting together is imperative. Brett Bachman, I've worked with him several times before. He did The Party's Just Beginning. He did Locker Room Z. I met him on Bitch originally. Like, I've known him for ages. I trust him completely. As Derek likes to say, I surround myself with a lot of no people. Brett is one of them. He will constantly argue with me about my story in some of the ways that challenge me in the best way possible. And so I wanted him on the road, and for exactly that. There's a lot of times, we were in Kansas City for 2 days. We were in, some of these places for hours. I knew that the only way that I would be able to pick up something or get something is if we were cutting it together and we were deciding that on the road. So we were able to save a couple of scenes where he was like, you really need to get this insert. You really need to get some snow. You really need to get whatever it was to help me out, because we were also getting very minimal coverage. There wasn't a lot of time to
How many cameras did you have?
One.
Okay. I mean, that was my guess.
The whole camera team was 2.
I know. With a crew that small, it would have to be.
That was it. One of our investors, by the way, Joel, ended up as the second AC / intern / he was very tall and could hold the camera.
Wow. That's cool. I mean, so was there any instance of you saw the cut and you're like, oh my God, we got to drive 2 hours to go back to get that extra shot?
No,
or something
actually, it was
grew
the
out of
exact opposite. It actually, like, there were some things, especially in the first couple of days, that I was panicked that we didn't get. And once I saw it, I was like, all right, it's not all the shots that I wanted. I didn't get the coverage that I wanted. I have a scene. Drop it out of your mind. Stop panicking about it and then move forward. So actually, the editing wasn't so much about what we weren't getting to pick up, but it was more about being able to allow me to rest and focus on what was next.
What were some deleted scenes? What were some things that were cut out that you still remember or miss?
There's a great scene, and Rahul nails it, of why they didn't take a flight. He's so good. And nobody asked the question. I wish people would have asked the question, because then I could have argued, but everybody was right. Then everybody's like, no, they just got in a car and they drove. What's the big deal? And I was like, because there's a great scene why Rahul tells you why that I love. And it's one of our deleted scenes. I think, do we get to put it on the DVD? Yeah, it's going to be on the DVD, so you can find out why they didn't take the flight.
Do you want to tell us what it was?
Hey, you got to watch it.
All right, got to watch it on the DVD. That works. Well, so how long was your editing period formally when you got back? How long did it take to get your...
It was about 6 weeks.
Okay.
It was pretty fast, because we had an assembly 3 days after, and then I promised...
3 days after?
Yeah, Brett's very fast, and he was cutting while we went. We also, when we got back to LA, so we did the whole on the road, but because we didn't really have the team to be COVID testing and isolating and everything, we had to pause for 5 days until we could isolate everybody, onboard them, and do all of that, because our team was so small and we were bringing on a lot more actors and more crew, and that just seemed like the safest way to do it. So he caught up to the road trip, and then we shot 8-ish days back in LA. I don't remember. And 8 or 9 days. And so he had caught up, and then afterwards, and then it was really funny, because this is exactly a Mali thing to do, where I was like, okay, I promise everybody I'm going on vacation for a whole week. Me and my boyfriend, we're going to go away, and when I come back, then I'll watch the cut and we can have a conversation. Brett sends it to me immediately. I'm on vacation with Katie Parker, randomly enough, and we're sitting in bed over my laptop watching it together. Never let your actors watch the first rough cut. But I did, and she loved it, and it was great. And then I immediately started working the next day, because I have a problem.
What was it like working with your dad for music?
It was great. He's really good.
Were you nervous that, like, what if we have a disagreement? Like,
No.
What if he wants to go in a way...
I would have just cut it.
Okay. Just making sure.
No,
I mean,
I actually worked with my dad twice before. The first film that I ever made, Do Not Disturb, he wrote the themes for that. That one, I'll never forget. I showed him the film, and he just sat there quietly. He watched the whole thing, and then after the film, he just got up and walked out of the room. And I was like, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, did he hate it that much? Wow. Like, and he came back about 20 minutes later, and I was just like, what the fuck? And he's like, I thought of a theme for you, so I went and I wrote it. And I said, okay, well, can I hear it? And he goes, no, you're a filmmaker now. Come back in a week. And I was like...
That's awesome.
So then I came back in a week, and then I had a lot of notes. And then I made him do it 3 times over. Turns out the first one he wrote was perfect.
Of course.
And on this one, I didn't actually hire him or anything. I was about to start the music with Ariel Marks, who is a brilliant composer, and he had, I had asked him about the tone, and he had written a couple of pieces. The moment where Teddy is drunk and Rose tucks him into bed, that was one piece that he had written. He just wrote a couple of pieces because his big thing was, don't overscore this. Don't go too big. You're going to fuck yourselves over. Like, it is a simple movie. It is little. Allow your score to be that, and then grow into something else when you need to. And Ariel Marks took it from there. So she took a couple of his themes, and she did. This is, again, I was like, there's not that much music. There's 52 minutes of music.
Yeah.
Whoopsies. And she was the one who balanced that tone, because so quickly this can be melodramatic, it can be too horror, it can be too sci-fi, it can be too comedy, it can be too slapstick, all the rest of that, and she just fucking nailed it.
It sounded fantastic. So, I mean, like, you had all the tropes that you wanted there. This movie could have ended a bunch of different ways. And as you're getting there, we're kind of in the room, this other space where Rose is kind of deciding where she wants to be. And, she's of course seeing her past life flash before her, and then a possibility of a future, which she realizes. Was that always your ending?
There's many different endings on this one.
Right. So let's. I want to hear because
I mean,
I
there's
could see this
50.
going really dark.
Yeah, I did it
before you get to Love Conquers All, which is where you arrive.
I definitely killed her in many drafts. She definitely died. One of my favorites that she died was she died and then Teddy gets in the car and her ghost is there and they drive off. And I thought that was cute. The thing is when you're dealing with the subject matter that we're talking about in the film, when you're dealing with depressed people who are going on a mission to kill themselves, there is a responsibility that you have. And for anybody who is watching this film and may have had any of those ideas, there's a huge, it is imperative that you, I believe, take on that responsibility of showing that there is hope and that it can go that direction.
Sure.
So for me, maybe, again, as I got a little bit older, I think when you're younger, you're fine with films just punishing people and hurting people because fuck you. I don't want to do that. You can see I'm not a hardcore person in that way. I really want to give people hope. And especially because I came back to this at the top of COVID when I had shingles and I was scared out of my mind.
Yikes.
Yeah, I don't do well with anxiety. I needed hope. This was my film that gave me hope. It needed to do that for others. So I wanted to be earnest about the darkness and my emotions, but that's also why I needed to find places to laugh, and ultimately why the biggest thing tied into Next Exit as the name is what she said is, I just want to try again. It's not about making all the right choices. It's not about being perfect. It's just about trying.
Any other weird endings you want to tell us about? Did Teddy join her in death at one point?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, you gotta write them all out.
You played with all the variants. Well, that makes sense.
She kills him. She stabs him instead. Yeah.
Well, so what was your toughest scene? As both a writer on the page, the one that you kept sweating and coming back to over and over again, and then as a director, what was your toughest scene? It doesn't at all have to be the same scene.
Well, the one that I always knew was going to be the hardest was the one that we talked about earlier, the bar scene with Teddy's dad. And because, again, it's all about responding. It's all about the false buildup of he goes up to the wrong guy and everything else, and making sure if those beats don't land, you're fucked. Like, the whole rest of the scene doesn't work. So I was very nervous on those days just because I knew how important it was to capture tone. Capturing tone is not, I need this line, I need this shot. It's that's the scary part. And then them going outside to have that fight. And I knew both the actors were a little bit nervous about that one. That was the one that they came up to me and they're like, they needed a little bit of guidance and support.
And you said earlier that you didn't rehearse, so...
That was the only one that we rehearsed on the day for like 30 minutes before.
Okay, good. Because I was like, how could you not?
Well, only because also there was... whenever there was stunts, because she does actually grab him and he does actually push her off and stuff like that,
Right.
we literally, you have to rehearse.
Yeah.
Because you need to make sure that they know which line they're doing, all of that. And so we did that. But that one was, again, I was either going to nail it or I wasn't going to at all. And if I didn't nail it, the rest of the film really doesn't work. So the tension going into that day of would I actually do what I said I could accomplish was, I think I can. And then it was really beautiful when I saw the takes and I was like, I got this. And I felt really good leaving that day. So that was definitely one of the hardest directing days, I would say.
And you say also one of your hardest scenes to write as well.
Yeah, it's finding that balance. It was so,
Sure.
A couple words too many too, and then it was very specific.
Well, we are going to take a few questions from the crowd because we actually have a crowd. This isn't a Zoom.
Hi.
I can't unmute everybody. Okay, you sir, right there. Good question. How strict were you on the script versus improvisation with your actors?
I wasn't nearly as strict as they were. If Rahul was going to change a word, he came up and asked permission first. There were times where...
That's very British and polite.
It is. And Katie was kind of the same. I mean, they memorized the commas, and they made it sound very natural. That being said, there were times when I encouraged them to improv or to do things, or they would come up and say, I have an idea. And I'd be like, let's do it. Because I love improv. Rahul's so much more funny than I am, specifically. So there was a couple of moments. One of my favorite improvs that he has is when he goes to Heather's house. Heather and Nick are there, and they're standing there awkwardly. And Nick says, hi, I'm Nick. And he goes, okay. I love that. That was a Rahul moment. And it was so funny because we had done it 3 times and I was about to move on and Rahul came running over to me and he goes, I have an idea. And I was like, all right, let's do it again. And he did that and I was dying. I just thought those little gems. And then the other thing of when they're right before we're getting to the Never Have I Ever and they're in the car and they're kind of sharing their stories. I had them going for a while. I was like, just keep going. I'll yell action when I want you to say the lines. And one of my favorite ones was the goldfish one, when he was like, "I," the goldfish, and she's like, "The family goldfish." That was one of my favorites. That was improv, but for the most part, they stayed on script.
That's cool. Another question. So obviously he's talking about notes. Like, how do you kind of navigate the tricky world of notes when somebody's saying, well, if we make a change here, it's going to have a ripple effect later on?
I love working with the producers that I work with and with my investors. I will almost take on any idea and then I will play it through. And then if it doesn't better the script, I say no. And somebody said earlier something about like, oh, they're going to twist your arm. And I'm like, I'm pretty immune to arm twisting. So you can go ahead and try all you want. It was one where there is an intro to this that is another 10 pages of explaining the world. It gets boring. And I love it. And it does help in some ways. And there was a piece of me that always wanted that. And I think there was a piece of us that thought that we needed that. And that is one of the things that when you're writing, you're like, they're going to need this information or nobody will understand it. And then all of a sudden everybody's just on the ride and you're like, oh, I was really wrong. And just listening to people's notes is actually one of my favorite things to do. Even if they're not the best notes, they're probably coming from a genuine place. So I actually love feedback.
Another question. Interesting question. Was there any inspiration from Elizabeth Holmes for the doctor behind the clinic who had the research into the afterlife?
There was a little bit. It was actually a mixture of Fauci meets Holmes was kind of the vibe we were going for. So you decided you want to trust that woman.
What a terrifying idea. But, actually, what happens to the Beyond Life Institute? So at the end of this film, they've decided not to go there, but there is this now connection where they mention a tracking device. We're going to try and, quote, track your journey.
Track and record you onto the other side.
Right. So what do you think's happening? And is there this sequel idea that you've talked about that gets us more into the afterlife and what's going on?
I mean, there's a piece of me that would love to do a sequel. The sequel is... Right, Rose defied the system. She came back. She wasn't supposed to. Dr. Stevenson is like, what happened here? So Rose and Teddy are on a road trip, and now it's a car chase where Dr. Stevenson is trying to find them.
Because they're going to experiment on her like E.T. if they catch up,
exactly.
Right?
And they're trying to keep her safe, but they also got to get the dog because, you can't do it without Stanley.
But the dog, Stanley, is back in New York. So
exactly.
Another road trip. I get it.
Another road trip. I love these characters so much. Their voices are so strong in my head. If I could stay in this world forever, I would. But I do feel like we have completed their story.
And so what's next? What is your next exit? What are you working on next?
I really want to make a horror film, like a straight horror film.
Does it have a title that you want to tell us?
It's one of two currently at the moment. And then I'm writing my next dream project. But as we have learned, that won't be ready very soon. It's going to take me a second. But I am writing one that is like of my heart and soul that I'm very excited. That is a ghost story that will answer a lot of the questions about my experiences with ghosts, because I'm kind of sick of answering it. I'm like, I'll just show you.
Good. That's great. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I cannot wait to see what you do next. Give it up again.
Thank you guys for coming out. This was great.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to writer-director Mali Elfman for being so generous with her time and coming down to chat about her feature film debut, Next Exit. And remember, folks, you can mask up and go see it. It has a limited theatrical release this weekend. It's opening weekend. It's definitely in LA and New York. It's in some other cities as well. You could also find it on VOD wherever you get video on demand. And you could also rent it in Apple or Amazon as well. So there are a lot of ways for you to find Next Exit. And I hope you support independent filmmaking and check it out. And without a doubt, thanks again to Magnolia, the distributor of Next Exit, for making this in-person Q&A happen, because it was a lot of fun. Of course, while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine. We just turned 10, folks. We lasted a decade, and we couldn't have done it without your support. And we just published our huge summer issue. It has Emmy contenders ranging from Stranger Things, Barry, Better Call Saul, Hacks, What We Do in the Shadows, and Station 11. We have actor Glenn Powell, who plays Hangman in Top Gun Maverick, talking about what it was like to be in that incredible film and his process. And, he's also a screenwriter. There's scripts to read in Backstory. There's also an interview with director John Carpenter on the 40th anniversary of The Thing. There's so many great pieces in our summer issue, and we're continuing to add to it. So it would be fantastic to have you as a subscriber. And of course, to sweeten the deal, if you want to subscribe now, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory. You just enter enter that code into the shopping cart at backstory.net, and it will give you access to both the iPad app and the website. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts go. That's right. These are Zoom interviews. So you could watch us have these discussions on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. It would really mean a lot to me to have you consider supporting my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2022. All rights reserved. Folks, if you want to find me on social media, you could always find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Twitter. You could also find those same accounts on Instagram. So Yo Goldsmith on Instagram or Backstory_mag on Instagram. You could check out our Facebook fan page, or you could even send us an email at backstoryletters@gmail.com. That inbox gets a little cluttered sometimes, so I apologize if I don't respond immediately, but I love hearing what folks have to say, and I promise you I will do my darndest to get to your message. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.